Good evening. I think it's almost evening, right? Thanks for staying, not for staying up late, but for coming at a time that's maybe where some people might be traveling already. This talk is on distributed teams that actually work. So how to make distributed teams work. I've been doing that for quite some time. I'll show some, I'll show timelines so you can get an idea. My name is Bertrand Delacretaz. I'm from the French-speaking part of Switzerland on Lake Neuchâtel. I've been living in Switzerland all my life except for 1 year. And it's my first time at CERN. Yesterday was my first time visiting CERN. Can you believe that? A big mistake for all these years before. It's a fantastic place. And this venue, that's incredible. I work for Adobe. We have an office in Basel working on large-scale content management systems. I've been also quite active on the Apache Software Foundation. I was on the board of directors for 14 years. And I've been fascinated by the power of these open source communities and trying to replicate that in a large organization. But the first, I like to tell stories. You will see that. The first story is about building a dam. And it's not a digital asset management system. It's an actual dam to stop a river. We were in a campground in France, and the campground was a bit on a hill, and the river was eroding, eating the hill. So the campground manager was not happy. So he had another trench dug, and he wanted us. At some point, he asked, "Hey, folks, you're on vacation here. Could you build a dam on the river so we can, so it can go into the new trench and spare my campground?" And we said, we have no clue how to build a dam. And, I'm not a civil engineer. I have no clue how to build dams. And we're there with a bunch of teenagers. And we said, well, why? Yeah, we'll try that. We'll do it. And so you can imagine teenage girls in short skirts, not working attire and stuff, working in the mud to build a dam. We started by throwing stones in the river, then putting small tree trunks, against the stones, and then more tree trunks, more stones, and then some sand in between so that it would block the river, and it worked. After, I don't know, it took us maybe half a day, and then the river started flowing in the new trench. Very gratifying, and you might think it has nothing to do with what we're talking about. Actually, it has, because I think we are wired to create things together. If I would have to create that dam myself, even if I was very strong, it would probably not have worked. It worked because people were exchanging ideas, because we were taking the teenagers seriously. They had fantastic ideas. It was really a team effort. And I think that's, as humans, we are really wired for that. There's also this saying to say, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go a long way, go together. And I think that's really what we are talking about. And in our software industry, and especially at CERN, I think we need to go a long way. The projects that I'm working on in the content management space, our customers use our stuff often for 10 years or 15 years. So it has to be solid, has to be well designed. And for that, you need teamwork. It's really, it's very few people who could do that on their own and get it right. I've been working remotely pretty much all of my career. Timeline here. So I was in the goal of this is also to explain where I come from in terms of remote working. It started in 98. I did my first open source project, founded by the Swiss Federal Chancellery. I was doing a project for them, and we needed to generate RTF documents. And I asked them, can I put this in open source? And at the time, the Swiss government didn't have any open source guidelines. Maybe they didn't really know what it was. So they said, oh, fine, do it, no worries. So it was my first open source project called J4. And then I got contacted by someone from Apache FOP, which is an Apache Software Foundation project which generates PDF. And they said, can you donate your module so it generates RTF as well? So that's how I started getting involved in the Apache Software Foundation in the early 2000s. And I quickly got fascinated by the power of these communities. I was involved in Apache Cocoon, a project that is retiring pretty much as we speak, but has lasted more than 20 years, which was a system to generate websites based on XML pipelines. So XML was good at the time. Today we'd probably avoid it, but it worked really well, and the community was incredible. Really a really strong community, really powerful, very opinionated people. You really needed to convince them to make decisions, and that's where I started being fascinated and studying pretty much how these things work. Then I worked for the Swiss television, Nouveau, also a show that's I think stopping this year. So something's happening to my projects nowadays. But it was a really interesting project, kind of out of the box for a large organization. We did a very lightweight content management system based on Apache Cocoon, also working remotely. Then I got hired by Day Software in Basel. I was living in Lausanne at the time. My 3 kids were going to university, so there was no way I would move. So I got hired remotely. Then started being active on the board of directors of Apache. That's the picture with the crown here. My son was very happy. He was 10 years old at the time, and said, "Oh, Dad, so we're going to have much more money now. You're on the board of directors." I said, "Yeah, I'm a volunteer on the board of directors, so." No, not much money, but it was super enriching in terms of activities, and also, working as distributed teams. On the board of directors, there's 9 people. I've done many terms with them, but we had people from Australia, from China, from California, from Switzerland, Germany. So very distributed and very hard to have meetings, actually. So no meetings. And then Day Software was acquired by Adobe. Adobe is not specially focused on remote working, but it's a large organization. So de facto, you end up working with people from the other side of the planet. So to explain that, I've been working remotely for most of my career and studying how this works, and that's what I'm going to present today. One slide about Adobe Basel, because they're paying my expenses to be here. So as I said, it's an evolution, it's an acquisition of Day Software. We still do the same thing. Basically, we do systems that are used to power large websites, automobile makers, global hotel chains, and these kinds of customers. And we have some jobs at careers.adobe.com if anyone's interested, or talk to me. So I've been presenting on this topic for quite some time. And if you see in some of my other presentations, this one is kind of a summary, putting it all together from different elements that I've been presenting over the years. The first one was in 2016, 2008. Yeah, 2008, right? At ApacheCon, so the conference of the Apache Software Foundation, on the open source collaboration tools, so focusing on the tools aspect, which is generally a bad idea, because as geeks, we often have a hard time agreeing on tools. There's Linux folks and the Mac folks and the C++ and the Python, so it's hard to agree, but it was the first approach. Then I had this presentation, which had a kind of a provocative title. I will not attend your meeting. I'm an open source person. But we'll speak about that. I think meetings are a big part of the problem. Then I had this article on opensource.com about asynchronous decision making, which is, I think, one of the key elements of this. How can you make decisions without having synchronous meetings, either in-person meetings or video meetings? They're pretty much the same from this angle. So how can you avoid that? Then I had another talk called "They Don't Understand Me: Tales from the Multicultural Trenches." In Switzerland, we have 4 different languages, and we also have 4 different cultures. The fact that you speak a different language, live in a different region, leads to small cultural differences where you think you understand each other, but you don't. And in a multicultural organization, there's also a lot of that. We'll talk about it. Then I also had a presentation on conciseness and clarity in writing. We'll talk about that. Because if you're in distributed team and you work asynchronously, most of your interactions are in writing. So you have to be efficient at writing, and it needs work. It's something that you can improve and has lots of benefits. So there are many challenges to to this distributed teams collaboration. The cultures can get in the way. The meetings, you have to be, meetings are very expensive and sometimes even impossible. You have to be concise in writing. You have to watch your language. The fact that it's not your mother tongue can get in the way. The time zones are a problem. If you need to do something efficiently, time zones get in the way. So there are many challenges, which I had been studying in these previous presentations, and now in this one, I'm kind of putting it all together. Starting with the meetings. My father was a carpenter. I'm actually a son, father, and brother of carpenters. I'm the wrong person in this family, but they're all nice. So my father was a carpenter. He had his workshop on the ground floor, and we had a flat on the first floor. And regularly he was late for lunch, and the excuse was he's gluing a chair. Daddy is gluing a chair, and it's a perfectly valid excuse. If you start gluing a chair and then you stop and go for lunch and come back and it's not finished, your chair will not work. The glue will be cured on one side and not on the other. It breaks the whole thing. So there are some activities on a maker schedule. There are some activities that cannot be interrupted, or they are wasted. Paul Graham has a great blog post on that. You have a link here. And what he's saying that there's two types of schedule. There's the maker's schedule, and I think that applies to us software developers because we are creating things. We need to be in the zone to have this flow. You need 3 hours sometimes to do something good because you should not interrupt this flow. And then there's a manager's schedule, someone who just has meetings the whole week. If they have one more meeting, it's 1 more hour. It doesn't affect the rest of their agenda, Whereas for a maker, if you have a meeting in the middle of the afternoon, maybe you don't start what you should do before the meeting because, I have a meeting at 3 p.m. There's no point in starting this. Then you come back from the meeting and say, I don't have enough time to start my thing. So your whole afternoon is ruined. And that's a very important thing to realize, different types of schedules and different impacts of a meeting depending on what you do. So meetings are very expensive. I would like to, when we have a meeting, I would like to have a kind of parking meter, and you need to put money in it, otherwise the meeting stops, and it would help people realize how much meetings are costly. You have the salaries of the people, you have the room which costs, you have the lost productivity of the makers, and the aggravation and everything, so it is very expensive. I'm not saying meetings are bad, I'm saying bad meetings are bad. We have to be careful for our meetings to be good because there's so many reasons for a meeting to fail. If you search videos about funny meeting failures on the web, you will find thousands of them, which can be very funny. But when it's your meeting, it's not really funny. Forgot to invite the right person, or someone is not behaving in a meeting, or we can't decide what to do. There's so many ways for a meeting to fail, but still, going back to my dam example from the beginning, meetings are also where things can happen. When you have a meeting with a whiteboard, with clever people, I do some music and I sometimes compare that to jazz improvisation. You're improvising with people that you trust and who are competent in their stuff, and that can be incredible. So, it's a question of setting up our meetings for success and avoiding the ones which are not likely to be successful. So the point is that meetings are very expensive and we need to be very careful on setting them up so that they are actually worth it. And a meeting by itself doesn't solve anything. It's the goals of the meeting and executing on these goals that will make the difference. And this can happen in many cases without a meeting. Which is the point of the next topic, the asynchronous decisions. Especially, I don't know if you're all software developers, but I'm talking about this from the angle of software, but it applies to anything that you build. It's made of decisions. When you create a software module, you have to decide which language to use, how to split the thing into smaller modules, who does what, and then, how do we arrange things like logging and DevOps and everything. There's tons of decisions involved in creating software. So we need to be efficient at making those decisions. And the vast majority of them can happen asynchronously. There are sometimes the very controversial decisions or how to come to a consensus where you actually need a synchronous meeting. It's much more efficient. But in many cases, you can manage all of that asynchronously. And these, I see 5 phases. Thanks to, I presented this at Basel 1 a few weeks ago, and someone pointed me to the first phase that I added. Shall we really do it? The first decision, especially in software, you want your software to be lean. So sometimes someone says, yeah, we need to add aggregated logging, AI-driven analysis of the logs and stuff. And you should ask, do we really need that? Can we do without it? That's the first thing. If the answer is no, okay, you can forget about all the rest and save your time. But if you decide that the decision is worth it, I see these 4 phases. First, you brainstorm. So you throw ideas in the air. You don't care if they are good ideas or bad ideas. All ideas are good to have at this point. It's just a flurry of ideas, and sometimes the funky ones can be really interesting for the next phases. And then in the next phase, you define the options. So you refine this list of somewhat crazy ideas to find the ones which are really worth taking into account in your decision. Not too many of them. I would say 3 to 5 to 7, not more than that. That's otherwise it's hard for the next phases. And then you build consensus. Sometimes it's obvious. Sometimes you look at your 5 options and you all agree, oh yeah, option 3 is clearly the best. So that's fine, okay, go for it. If you can't get a consensus, you need a mechanism to break the tie. You need a mechanism to make a decision, because you don't want to wait for ages. You have something to do, so it probably cannot wait. In Apache projects, we have voting rules. If the team cannot come to a consensus, we vote, and then there's rules to define which option wins in the vote. It can be a bit frustrating because you might lose the vote, but at least we move forward and we don't stay stuck on this lack of consensus. And then the last phase is making the decision, the actual decision. In many cases, it's already done, but if you're a formal organism like a board of directors or a government, you probably have a formal process to ratify the decision, and this is what you need to do. So these are the 5 phases of a decision. All of them can happen asynchronously. The decision could be, I like to work with GitHub issues, for example, GitHub tickets or GitHub discussions. And then you can express the options and then express the consensus. Maybe you have some side calls to discuss them, but then you put this in the thing. And then you have one web page that expresses your decision, how you got there, and what you decided in the end. This is super useful when you have someone joining your project later, because they can look at the web pages and see the decisions, get a feel for what you're doing, and maybe ask much more, a smaller number of questions, but much more pregnant questions based on what they read already. So working asynchronously in writing means that all this is self-documenting, and this is super useful for the history and evolution of your project. This is how we work in open source projects. In the open source projects where I've been involved, in the Apache Software Foundation, it's usually people from different countries, different companies. There's no boss, so you have to work like that, and it can be super efficient if you're careful. In terms of tools, as I said, I don't want to go too deep into the tools area because we often disagree. So I'll just be speaking of I'll mostly be speaking of tool families, and there's 2 things which are key. You need a broadcast channel. Here I'm taking the example of the marine radio. When you're sailing and you need to call, you have a problem or you need to warn people from something, you call on channel 16, which is broadcast channel that everybody is supposed to listen to. And then typically the Coast Guard will say, okay, Bertrand, we switch to channel 11 to free this broadcast channel for other stuff. And we can work in the same way. We can have a broadcast channel, maybe in my times it would be mailing list or Slack channel or whatever, where you announce, we're working on a new decision. This is the URL of the page where we're discussing it. And then people will branch off to that thing. And then that web page for the decision acts as a case management tool. You know, like an infrastructure ticket. You work in one page on the decision progressing through the different phases. So these are the two types of tools that you need: broadcast channel and case management tool, which can be many things. They don't need to be. You know, I'm not going to tell you use this or this. There's many things that can work in these roles. Interestingly, so the Swiss Federal Council, that's 7 people, they meet every week for, I think, 4 hours, and they take about 70 to 80 decisions in 4 hours. That's a lot. Why? Dramatic pause. Why? Because it's all prepared in advance. And I actually wrote the software that they use for many years to do that. They basically have a big agenda of 70 or 80 items. And then the departments look at this agenda and try to solve as many of the things in advance, where the Federal Council just has to ratify the decisions. And then they put this on different colors. They have 4 colors for the agenda list, agenda for the meeting. The orange list is for items which are not contested. So the chancellor will say, okay, page 1, can we say yes to everything from 1 to 20? And they say, yeah, okay, done. So in 10 seconds, you have 10 decisions made. 10 decisions formalized. Of course, they have been prepared in advance. And then you have another list which they need to reply to the parliament, another list for the white list for the important or complex things where they will need more time to discuss, and then the green list for things that are confidential, where some people will need to leave the room and so on. It's a very similar organization actually to the Apache Board of Directors. So I was active there, and the Board of Directors of the ASF has one monthly video meeting, which lasts about 1 hour, 1 hour and a half. And we also make about 70 to 80 decisions in this meeting, because most of them, 90%, 95%, are prepared in advance, and then we just have to ratify them. So it's a kind of a hybrid meeting where you have lots of asynchronous preparation combined with a synchronous meeting, and this is the most efficient thing. And you also need this for these kind of organisms because of the formal rules of operation. But I think yeah, combining things can also be very efficient. So I said I was not going to talk about tools, but I'm still going to talk a little bit about tools to show the spectrum, you know, which kind of tools you can use for these activities. The first one is one from my times, but which is still totally valid today. You can use, for your broadcast channel or to discuss some things, you can use a mailing list. But if you use a mailing list, it's good to use tags. Here we have a very crude form of tags, you know, words in brackets in the subject line. It's super useful. It allows you to skim, you know, you get maybe on a busy project, you come in the morning and you have maybe 70 messages. But if they're tagged, you look at the tag and say, not for me, not for me, not for, oh, this one, yes. So you can very quickly find the 5 messages that are relevant to you out of 70 by just looking at the subject lines. So any any basic channel can work if you're careful on how to use it. My favorite tool for discussing for asynchronous decisions is GitHub tickets or GitHub discussions, if you have them. Also using tags to sort them out. It's kind of the same thing, but then you end up with 1 page and 1 URL for every decision. And that's super useful, because when you're discussing things with people, you say, yeah, we need to work on decision number 349, and you know exactly what it is. There's no ambiguity. So it's very good to also have a single URL for these discussions. Chat is a topic that we need to address nowadays. I'm hearing everywhere that the young folks, they want to use chat, that Slack is a thing. I'm not fully convinced. I think chat is a great tool, but it's really meant for here and now discussions. Chat is great, if you have an incident and you need a war room to discuss, and you're pretty much working synchronously for some time, then the chat room is perfect. If you're using chat as your main channel and then you go away for a week and you come back, it can be really hard to catch up, because it's very difficult to structure it in a way that allows that. So I think for me, chat is super useful, but I use it beside, on the side, and then the core, the backbone will be GitHub issues or, this case management system that I'm talking about. If you're working with people who are not too keen on digital tools, you can even use shared documents. If you're part of an association and you want to work like that, you can very much use shared documents, and one document per decision maybe, or one document per family of decisions. It can work as long as the documents are actually shared. You don't want people to send documents over email and then everybody has a different copy. That will not work. But if it's shared, that can work as a crude way of having a case management system. So there are many different tools which can actually work, but again, it comes back to these two abstract tools, the broadcast channel and the case management system, which will allow you to run your asynchronous decision system, which I think is really the core of making distributed teams work. If you're able to do asynchronous decisions, it's possible to work completely remotely. If you're unable and you need meetings all the time, then it will be very hard. Either it's painful because people have meetings at weird times, or it doesn't work because a video meeting with more than 3-4 people is super hard. In-person meetings are super expensive, so I really think the asynchronous decision mechanisms are a must-have if you want to work remotely. Next topic is the concision and clarity. I'll start with an example, also a bit off target, but I think it's interesting. When we watch movies at home, I often use IMDb to select the movies, and I like how they are structuring the information. Here's an example of a page from IMDb, and you have the title, and it's my first decision point. Sometimes I see a movie title that doesn't speak to me. If I see butterflies and honey in Chile, maybe it's not super interesting for me, so I'll watch something else. So I have a first decision point with a title. Then I look at in this case, they put the poster of the movie and the trailer, and okay, whatever works. The guy has looks funny. Maybe that's interesting. Oh, it's a movie by Woody Allen. I like Woody Allen. You getting in multiple stages on your decision process, and then for me, the last item will be watching the trailer, and this will usually inform my decision. But sometimes I'm just turned away by the title, and I lost just 5 seconds, and that's it. So I think we can do the same thing in our written communications to work multi-level, so people can make a good decision without spending too much time. And actually, when you are writing on these channels, you are writing for an audience. If you're in a busy open source project or maybe an internal project, if there's 150 people on the channel, there's one person writing and 149 persons reading. So it's worth it to spend a bit more of your time to save time for them. And that's why concise writing will enable you to do. So this is an example from a message that I sent when I was on the Apache board of directors about the change to be made to the website. First thing, this is a mailing list, a very basic tool, but it works if you're careful. First thing, subject line, website in brackets. So if someone's not interested in a website, they ignore it. They spend half a second reading this and going away. Then a subject line that means something, not just question or something that expresses what it's about. Please review the stage board content. Then there's an introduction, one paragraph, short paragraph that explains what this is about. At this point, you can also decide to leave if you're not interested. And then I have the meat of of my question with links, so people can get more information without having to ask again. And then last point is expressing my intention. What's next? I'll wait for the discussion to settle before committing this thing. You know, multiple stages where people can decide to read on or not, and then a clear expression of your intention so they can know what you're about to do, and you don't need 20 messages to fix this, you know. If someone's not interested, they will ignore it. If someone has a small comment, they will say, hey, Bertrand, before committing, can you please change this? You know, maybe you'll solve the thing in 5, 6 messages, and this is super efficient compared to just having a message that's an opener. You see that sometimes on chat. You know, people start a Slack conversation saying, hi. Okay. Yeah, okay. Hi. Even if I write on Slack, I will usually try to use the same structure. It's usually shorter because we tend to use shorter styles on Slack, on chat. But you can still, you know, craft your message so that it doesn't take 25 messages to get to the point, and you're not blocking people for that time. So in this example, I'm providing the readers with multiple decision points so that they can not waste too much time reading what you know, they don't have to waste too much time on my problem if it's not their problem, basically. Writing concisely is something that you need to work on. These two blocks of text, they say exactly the same thing. And one is much more efficient than the other. Today, we're lucky to have large language models and chat tools which can help us do that. You could feed, I didn't try to do that, but I should try to take the right thing and put it into Claude or whatever and say, can you write a more concise version? I'm not sure if they will be as good as me. I'm pretty good at that. I'm a bit, you know, I don't want to boast too much, but I've been working on that for a long time, and I think it's very important to be really concise when you write, and it just takes work. You know, by just doing it, you will get better at it. And expressing your intention. I'm a cyclist, and I'm a cyclist who's alive. In part because when I'm cycling, I made very expressive, you know, signs of what I'm going to do. In Denmark, they do that when they're cycling and they are about to stop. Super useful. And we can do the same in our communications. In my example, the last paragraph said, I'm going to wait 24 hours, and if there's no objection, I will commit this. Radiating intent, you know, expressing what you're about to do. There's a great book on this by David Marquet, who was in the US military, and they applied this principle on military submarines, where the people who steer, the person who's steering the submarine can say, Captain, I intend to turn 10 degrees to port. Do you agree? Expressing the intention, you know, instead of asking for permission in a complex way. I'm going to do that. Does anyone object? That's a super efficient way to steer the discussion, you know, in the right direction without wasting too much time. So again, these are things that need work, but that you can practice all the time, and then your team and yourself become better at this remote collaboration. The next topic is multicultural teams. And when I ask people what their culture is, they often say, oh, I'm from France, I'm from Germany, I'm from Bern. That's one angle on the culture, but are there any drummers in the room? No drummers. Soccer fans? Yes, a few. Anyone doing sailing? Me, yeah. All these things, they influence your culture. Soccer fans might have a jargon that I don't understand. I'm totally clueless about soccer, you know. And these things influence our cultures. In a company, there's also the culture of managers versus engineers, which can be different. We have different goals. We have different ways of things. So there are always many angles to the culture, which make your team a multicultural team, even if you're, okay, I know CERN is multicultural anyway, but even if you're all in Lausanne, all from Lausanne working together, you will have different cultures based on where you come from, what are your hobbies, and so on. And that can be a very hard thing to, to overcome. I've studied a bit the Costa Concordia disaster, this big ship that crashed, and there were 38 nationalities on board, which is a challenge in itself. And the official working language was Italian, because that was the flag of the ship was Italian. I love Italian. It's a very nice language. It's not the most well-known language on the planet. And if you have a team with 38 different nationalities, I'm not sure if Italian is the right language to choose. And the person who was at the helm testified that they often did not understand the orders given by the captain in English. So the 38 nationalities, official language is Italian, and the captain still speaks English, but he can't speak it. That's kind of hard, and I think this played a role in this catastrophic event. It's not fun at all, but it shows that the cultures can really get in the way, and I think in our team it can be the same. So we have to be very careful. For example, jokes often don't work across cultures. Things that can be good for someone from France as a joke will not work for someone from Germany, or the opposite. Or there's many things in a multicultural environment which you have to be careful about. The aviation industry has a great thing to help with that, which is writing in simplified English. They have created a standardized vocabulary, ASD, STE 100, whatever, which has recommendations on how to write simple English so that people understand the aircraft's technical manual. We can do the same in our teams. Try to write in a simple way when you're writing on a shared channel. Even if you're someone from Oxford and your English is fantastic, try to get to the level of people like me for whom it's a second language, and I might not get all the subtleties. And it's the same thing as a concise writing. You need to work on it to be simple. And do not hesitate to ask for or reformulate when you're not sure if you understand something. So basically, the multicultural issue is about avoiding misunderstandings. As I was saying, when we speak among people from different cultures, it can often happen that we think we understand each other, but we don't. Or we think this is funny, and the other person doesn't find that funny at all. So we have to be really careful about that. Reformulate, ask for clarification, assume good intentions. It needs, it requires some effort. And to be aware of this risk, I think, is very helpful. So this is all I had. That's a lot of material, but I think it's worth considering these different topics when we work among distributed teams, and maybe look at where you could improve that in your own team. Are we doing good in terms of conciseness, instead of being multi-level discussions, having unique URLs for decisions and stuff? There's many opportunities, I think, to improve your teams. I don't have a magic recipe. It needs work in multiple areas, but I think it can really work. And it opens so many opportunities, to avoid boring meetings, to be more efficient, to be able to work on your own time, to be less constrained by the other people's schedules and stuff. So I think that there's lots of benefits, without forgetting that meetings can be fantastic. As I said, I'm not anti-meetings, I'm anti-bad meetings. The worst for me is the status meeting, when you're here sitting for an hour and then you have 2 minutes to say, I did this and this and this, and people say, great, and then they move to the next one. It's not really good use of your time. But they can be, as I said, meeting when you have a whiteboard and you're brainstorming with clever people, it's incredibly efficient. So it's a question of finding this balance and looking maybe at these different aspects and how they are working in your team or not. The QR code is a link to my press book, as I call it. So we have recordings of these different topics, and you can watch them. This talk, I think it's recorded today, so it will be available soon, hopefully. But there's also very similar talks on that website. We have 5 minutes for questions, if there are any. Yes?
I have a question regarding all the possible rules, all the possible suggestions you gave us. For example, tomorrow I go back to my office and I start applying this better communication, this say concise communication, and sending like very good messages in which I have intent, title, maybe tags, and everything important.
Uh-huh.
But in my team, there will be people that haven't assisted to these stores. Maybe they will answer in the chat with those 10 messages.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if this kind of communication is better to be taught to management. If this talk is more is much more like oriented to management, because me and myself as a single individual cannot change the behavior of my entire team. And if I'm the only one behaving like this, it's not going to work.
Right, I agree. In our teams, what has worked well, so initially it was only the developers working like that. And at some point, we've been able to convince the product managers to also work like that for a large part. And this was fantastic because it showed the same thing coming from two different directions. Sometimes you have some opposition between the product managers and the developers, and it was fantastic to see this coming from both directions. And of course, management has to be on board. But maybe you can get some allies who want to work in the same way, and then start doing it. And then if people reply in a different style, what happens in the open source projects, unfortunately, is too often people are being rude, for example. And when that happens to me, I will completely ignore the rude part and answer very precisely to the part that's worth it. And people see this, they write text like that to insult me, and then I reply with 2 lines just on the point that makes sense. And then it makes people think, they say, maybe I shouldn't have written all this crap. So I think leading by example and trying to find some allies which will be open to these changes, but it takes time and effort. It's not going to happen like that. But I agree, if management can be on board, that's get your management to watch my talk. I think that's clearly the best. Yeah, and these changes in the team take time. Really, it's an effort that takes some time.
About that, would you suggest proposing some rules to the teams? Of course, like in a proactive way. Like I believe that even if people read some very concise message, they're not going to answer in a very concise message automatically. So, for example, I see in open source projects a lot of time there is a precise set of rules of this is how we handle discussion in threads. Or
Yes.
You should put a pull request or whatever. Maybe a concise set of rules is necessary to steer.
Yeah, it's good, but it's like with kids or with anybody. I think you need the minimal set of rules. If you have too many rules, it's going to fail definitely. So maybe I might start by saying every decision must have a URL, a persistent URL. And say, okay, well, so we can use Git tickets for decisions? Yeah, why not? And then there can be lots of noise around it. You could have a big conversation on Slack, but the backbone of the decision is documented in this ticket. And then people will see the value of that. When someone is sick or goes on vacation for 3 weeks, they come back and what did you do in 3 weeks? Look at these decisions. Look at the last 10 issues from this GitHub repository, and these are decisions in the last 3 weeks. And the noise from for example, Slack channel is not important to understand the thing. If the decision pages, you could do a decision log or whatever. I might start with that. Just one thing, one small thing, but that can have a lot of impact. That would be my recommendation. There's 1 minute left. If there's another question, yes?
I saw in one of your examples, there was like an email with a link to a Jira ticket. How do you avoid the fragmentation of the discussion with, the possible
So in Apache projects, the rule that is starting to fail is that if it didn't happen on the dev list, it didn't happen. Every Apache project has a developers mailing list, and in theory, you should be able to read only that and get all the important information. That's one way to do it. I'm saying that it's starting to fail in Apache because people are using Slack more on other channels and whatever. In our case, I would say you have to define, ideally, you have to define the role of the different channels. So Slack is for unstructured chat. It's not archived, it can go away, we don't care. Then maybe GitHub tickets are for the decisions. And Jira tickets might be for the implementation details, something like that. I think defining the roles of the channels can help. And then you know that when you come back from vacation, if you look only at the decision pages, you will get the core of everything that happened. Okay, we are at time. So thank you very much for being here.